Welcome to Life Stories, where we share tales of love, resilience, and the incredible power of human connection. Today's story takes us on a journey of two lives intertwined by a simple act of kindness, a young girl's compassion for a boy on the street that sparks an unbreakable bond. Years later, fate reunites them in the most unexpected way, proving that true connections can withstand time and distance. Don't miss this heartwarming tale that reminds us of the beauty in small gestures and the hope they bring. Subscribe to our channel to begin today's story. Emma was just 7 years old, a little girl with boundless curiosity and a heart far too big for her small frame. She had a habit of noticing things others often overlooked. On one sunny afternoon, as she skipped down Main Street with her backpack swinging behind her, something caught her eye. It was a boy, not much older than herself, sitting quietly on the corner of the street. His clothes were worn and ill-fitting, his gaze distant yet heavy with sadness, as though the weight of the world rested squarely on his small shoulders. While others passed by without a second glance, something about him made Emma pause. Perhaps it was the silence in his demeanor, the way he seemed both invisible and yet so present. She stood there for a moment, hesitating, clutching her lunch bag. Finally, summoning courage she didn't know she had, she approached him. "Hi," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Would you like a piece of my sandwich?" The boy looked up, startled, as though he hadn't heard anyone address him in ages. His eyes met hers, wide and uncertain, as if trying to gauge whether her kindness was genuine. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I'm Jacob." Emma handed him half of her peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and as he took a small bite, a faint smile crossed his lips. It was shy, almost fleeting, but it lit up his face in a way that made Emma's heart swell. That moment marked the beginning of a connection neither of them could have predicted. From that day forward, Emma made a habit of stopping by Jacob's corner after school. Each time, she brought a little something for him, a snack, a piece of fruit, or even a picture book she thought he might enjoy. For Jacob, these gestures were more than just acts of kindness, they were lifelines. Each gift was a reminder that someone cared, that he wasn't invisible. One afternoon, as they sat together under the shade of a nearby tree, Jacob opened up in a way he hadn't before. One day, he said, his voice carrying a rare note of hope, "I'm going to have my own house. A place where I can feel safe." Emma beamed at him. "And I'll visit you," she replied with a giggle, her eyes sparkling with the innocence of childhood. They spent hours like this, sharing dreams and exchanging stories. Emma would tell him about her school projects and her favorite books, while Jacob would recount memories of happier times, moments before life had taken a harsher turn. Together, they created a little bubble of happiness, a haven that shielded them from the harsh realities of the world. As their friendship grew, Emma began to cherish these moments more than anything else in her day. Jacob wasn't just the boy on the street anymore, he was her friend, her confidant. There was something pure, almost sacred, about their bond, a connection that seemed untouched by the complexities of the outside world. "Do you think I can make it?" Jacob asked one windy afternoon, holding a crust of bread Emma had given him. "Of course. You can," Emma replied firmly, her voice filled with the conviction of someone who truly believed in him. "You're stronger than you think, Jacob." He smiled at her, a smile that, for a brief moment, seemed to lift the burdens he carried. In those shared minutes, it felt as though the world had faded away, leaving only the two of them and their unspoken promise to hold on to each other. But life, as Emma would come to learn, has a way of changing everything. One grey, drizzly day, Emma arrived at their usual meeting spot to find it empty. Jacob wasn't there. At first, she thought he might have wandered off and waited for hours, her snack clutched tightly in her hand. But the day turned to dusk, and still, there was no sign of him. The following day was no different. Nor was the day after that. Each time she returned to the corner, her heart grew heavier with the weight of his absence. "Where are you, Jacob?" she whispered one afternoon, her voice trembling with the fear that something terrible had happened to him. As days turned into weeks, the realization that Jacob might never return began to settle in. The longing she felt for his presence mixed with a hollow ache that no words could soothe. She would sit under their tree, her untouched snacks by her side, replaying their conversations in her mind. His laughter, his dreams, his smile, they all felt like echoes now. Fragments of a friendship that had been taken from her too soon. For Emma, Jacob's disappearance wasn't just a loss, it was a lesson in the fragility of connection. She was too young to understand the complexities of his life or the reasons he might have left. All she knew was that someone who had become an integral part of her world was gone, leaving behind a void she didn't know how to fill. The days that followed were quiet, heavy with a sadness Emma couldn't quite articulate. Yet, in the midst of her sorrow, she held on to the memories they had shared, cherishing them like treasures. Little did she know, those moments of kindness and connection would go on to shape her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. And though Jacob was gone, his presence lingered in her heart, a silent reminder of the profound impact a single act of compassion could have. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Yet Jacob remained absent from the corner of Main Street where Emma had first met him. At 7 years old, Emma was too young to fully comprehend why someone might vanish so completely. Yet her heart carried the weight of his absence with an intensity that belied her age. Each afternoon after school, she'd rush to the spot they had shared, her eyes scanning the bustling street for any sign of his familiar figure. It wasn't just the corner that felt empty, it was Emma's world. She had grown accustomed to the rhythm of their friendship, to the joy of sharing her day with someone who listened with rapt attention. Without Jacob, the days seemed duller, her laughter quieter, her heart heavier. Her parents noticed the change in her demeanor. "Is everything all right, Emma?" her mother asked one evening as Emma pushed her dinner around on her plate. Emma simply nodded, not knowing how to explain the ache in her chest or the questions that buzzed relentlessly in her mind. Where was Jacob? Was he safe? Did he miss her as much as she missed him? Despite her parents' concern, Emma kept Jacob's disappearance to herself. It felt too precious, too personal to share. She didn't want the world to trivialize the bond they had shared or dismiss it as a passing friendship between children. For her, Jacob was more than that. He was her friend, perhaps her best friend, and his absence was a wound she carried quietly. Each afternoon, she would still pack an extra snack, hoping that by some miracle Jacob would return. She'd sit by the old tree they had claimed as their meeting spot, waiting until the shadows grew long and the chill of evening set in. With every passing day, her hope dimmed. But she couldn't bring herself to stop trying. She feared that giving up would mean letting go of him forever. As time went on, Emma's longing for Jacob transformed into something deeper, a blend of melancholy and quiet resilience. Though she was just a child, she began to understand that the world was not always kind, that people sometimes disappeared from our lives without explanation. She clung to the memories of their time together, replaying their conversations and the sound of his laughter like a cherished lullaby. "Do you think he'll ever come back?" she whispered one day to the empty air, her voice tinged with both hope and despair. The only answer was the rustling of leaves in the wind. Her sadness didn't go unnoticed at school. Emma, who had once been lively and full of questions, now spent her recesses sitting quietly under the large oak tree, staring into the distance. Her friends tried to coax her into games of tag or jump rope, but she declined with a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Life continued around her, as it always does, and Emma did her best to keep up. Yet, there was a part of her that remained firmly rooted in the past, tied to the memory of a boy who had given her friendship and taken a piece of her heart with him when he left. Seasons changed. Winter brought a blanket of snow, covering their old meeting spot in a pristine white layer. Emma found herself wondering if Jacob was warm wherever he was. If he had a coat to shield him from the biting cold. Spring arrived with its blossoms and fresh rains. And still, the ache in her heart persisted. By the time summer rolled around, Emma had learned to carry her longing with a quiet grace. She stopped packing an extra snack but never stopped glancing at the corner of Main Street each time she passed by. A part of her still hoped, though she knew better than to expect. What Emma didn't realize was that her friendship with Jacob, though brief, had left an indelible mark on her soul. It had taught her the importance of kindness and the power of connection. Even in the face of life's uncertainties, Jacob's disappearance had planted a seed in her heart, a seed that would one day grow into a fierce determination to help others like him. For now, though, she was just a little girl with a big heart and an empty corner of Main Street that she couldn't quite let go of. What she didn't know was that Jacob's absence was not the end of their story, but the beginning of something far greater than she could imagine. Years passed, and Emma grew from a curious, compassionate child into a determined and thoughtful young woman. While her outward demeanor blossomed with age, the memories of her childhood friendship with Jacob remained vivid, etched into the corners of her heart. The quiet ache of his absence had never fully disappeared, but it had transformed into something more profound, a call to action. A mission she could no longer ignore. As Emma entered her 20s, she found herself drawn to journalism, a career that offered her the chance to tell stories that mattered. It wasn't a decision made lightly, it was born out of years of carrying the questions Jacob's disappearance had left behind. What happened to children like him? Why did their struggles go unseen by so many? And most importantly, how could she give them a voice? Emma's first assignments were standard fare, covering community events, writing lifestyle features, and crafting profiles on local figures. While she excelled at these tasks, she felt a sense of hollowness. The stories she wrote, though engaging, didn't align with the purpose that had been growing within her since childhood. She wanted to tell stories that could make a difference. Ones that could shine a light on the invisible lives society so often ignored. Her breakthrough came one cold winter's day in Chicago. Assigned to cover a citywide charity drive, Emma noticed a group of children huddled together under a makeshift shelter near a park. Their faces were gaunt, their clothes insufficient for the biting cold, but their eyes held a spark of resilience that struck her deeply. In their faces, she saw Jacob, his quiet courage, his unspoken hope. Emma set aside her original story and spent the rest of the day talking to these children. She listened as they shared fragments of their lives, nights spent searching for warmth, days spent hoping for kindness. One boy, no older than 10, looked up at her with defiant determination. "I want to be someone when I grow up," he declared. Emma smiled, her heart aching with the familiar pang of remembering Jacob's dreams. "And you will," she said softly. "I promise you will." From that moment, Emma's career took a decisive turn. She became relentless in her pursuit of stories about neglected children and the systemic failures that left them vulnerable. Her articles painted vivid portraits of lives marked by hardship but also resilience. She wrote not only to inform but to evoke empathy, crafting narratives that demanded action. Her work wasn't easy. Many of her newsroom colleagues questioned her focus. "Why don't you write about something lighter, Emma?" one editor asked after she submitted another piece about homeless children. "This must be a heavy burden to carry." Emma shook her head, her resolve unshaken. "If I don't speak up for them, who will?" she replied. Her voice carried the weight of conviction, the kind that only comes from personal experience. She wasn't just writing about these children, she was advocating for them, hoping her words would ignite change. As Emma's articles gained traction, she found herself interviewing children in shelters, on street corners, and in parks across cities like New York and Detroit. Each child's story was unique, yet they shared common threads of adversity and resilience. Emma treated these stories with care, knowing the trust these children placed in her was sacred. Through her work, Emma learned just how deeply systemic issues ran. She exposed bureaucratic failures, lack of resources, and societal indifference, sparking conversations that had long been avoided. Her readers began to see these children not as statistics but as individuals with dreams, fears, and untapped potential. Emma's reporting began to garner attention. Community leaders reached out, asking how they could help. Non-profit organizations used her articles to advocate for funding and policy changes. Slowly, the world started to notice what Emma had always seen: the undeniable worth of every child, no matter their circumstances. Though she felt a sense of accomplishment, Emma carried a bittersweet awareness with her. For every child she helped, she thought of Jacob, wondering where he was, if he had found the safety he once dreamed of. Her work was, in many ways, a tribute to him, a way to honor the friendship that had shaped her and the promise she had made to herself to never stop caring. And so, Emma pressed on, her pen a weapon against injustice, her voice a beacon for those still waiting to be seen. What she didn't know was that the work she poured her heart into would soon bring her face to face with the one person she had never stopped searching for. It was a late autumn evening in Los Angeles, the air crisp with the promise of winter, when Emma's life took a sudden, violent turn. She had just finished a long day at work, her mind preoccupied with the details of her latest article. The streets were busy, headlights forming endless trails of light as cars zipped through the intersections. Emma, exhausted and eager to get home, barely noticed the vehicle that sped through a red light until it was too late. The impact was immediate and catastrophic. Glass shattered, metal crumpled, and Emma's world blurred into a chaotic whirlwind of noise and light before slipping into darkness. When the ambulance arrived, paramedics worked quickly to stabilize her, their voices urgent but controlled. "She's unconscious but has vital signs," one of them reported, carefully placing a cervical collar around her neck. Emma was rushed to the nearest hospital, unaware of the battle being fought to save her life. Inside the emergency room, a team of doctors and nurses prepared to assess the extent of her injuries. At the head of the team was Dr. Jacob Carter, a chief surgeon renowned for his skill and calm demeanor under pressure. For Jacob, every case was personal, each patient a reminder of the life he had fought to build after his tumultuous childhood. As he scrubbed in, he focused entirely on the task ahead, unaware that the woman lying on the operating table was someone who had once been his entire world. The surgery was long and grueling, every moment demanding precision and focus. Jacob's hands moved methodically, repairing the damage caused by the accident. Around him, the team worked in seamless coordination, guided by his steady commands. "Let's stabilize her pressure," he said, his tone firm yet reassuring. Despite the intensity of the situation, Jacob remained composed, his mind locked on one goal: saving her life. Hours passed before the operation finally reached a turning point. "Pressure is rising, and vitals are stabilizing," a nurse announced, her voice tinged with relief. Jacob exhaled deeply, the weight of the procedure beginning to lift. Though exhausted, he knew they had succeeded. Emma was alive. As the team cleaned up and prepared to move Emma to the recovery ward, a nurse handed Jacob the patient's file. He flipped it open, his eyes scanning the information out of habit. Then he froze. The name on the page hit him like a thunderclap: Emma Brooks. For a moment, Jacob stood motionless, his mind flooded with memories. He saw her as she had been all those years ago, a little girl with bright eyes and an infectious smile, offering him a sandwich on a street corner. The girl who had given him hope, who had believed in him when no one else had. "It can't be," he murmured, his voice barely audible. But as he looked at her face, now pale and bruised, the recognition was undeniable. It was Emma. The revelation left Jacob reeling. How had she ended up here, in this condition? What had brought her to Los Angeles? Questions swirled in his mind. But one truth stood out above all: the woman who had once saved him with her kindness was now lying unconscious. And he had been the one to save her life. Without hesitation, Jacob made his way to the recovery room. Emma lay there, connected to monitors that beeped steadily, a testament to her fragile yet persistent life force. Jacob approached her bedside slowly, his emotions a whirlwind of gratitude, nostalgia, and an overwhelming need to protect her. "Emma," he whispered, his voice breaking. "It's really you." He sat down beside her, his gaze fixed on her face. The years had changed her, yet he could still see the girl who had shared her dreams with him under the shade of an old tree. The memories came rushing back, her laughter, her unwavering belief in his potential, and the way she had made him feel seen when the rest of the world had looked away. Jacob stayed by her side for hours, watching over her with the same quiet determination that had carried him through the darkest times of his own life. He didn't know how she would react when she woke up, or if she would even remember him, but he was prepared to wait as long as it took. As the night deepened, Jacob whispered softly, as if she could hear him through the fog of unconsciousness. "You were my first friend, Emma. My only friend. And now, it's my turn to take care of you." The words hung in the air, a quiet promise made to the girl who had once given him everything. Jacob didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't let Emma face it alone. Emma's eyelids fluttered open, her surroundings swimming into focus through a haze of pain and confusion. The sterile white walls, the rhythmic beeping of monitors, and the faint scent of antiseptic told her she was in a hospital. Her head throbbed as she tried to piece together how she had ended up there. Gradually, her eyes focused on a figure sitting beside her bed, a man with a gentle, watchful expression. "Emma," he said softly, his voice a mix of relief and something deeper, something she couldn't quite place. "Do you remember me?" She blinked, her mind still groggy, trying to make sense of his words. His face seemed familiar, but the connection eluded her. I think I do," she murmured, her voice weak. "But I can't place you." The man nodded, his eyes filled with both understanding and longing. "It's me, Jacob," he said. "The boy on the street. The one you used to bring sandwiches to." Emma's breath caught in her throat as the memories came rushing back, bright afternoons under the old tree. Jacob's shy smiles, the way he'd shared his dreams with her. "Jacob," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is it really you?" "It's me," he confirmed, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "I never forgot you, Emma. Not a single day." Tears welled up in her eyes as the weight of their shared history settled over her. "I thought I'd never see you again," she said, her words laced with both joy and sorrow. "You just disappeared." Jacob lowered his gaze, a flicker of regret crossing his face. "Life took me places I didn't expect," he admitted. "But I carried you with me, Emma. Your kindness, your belief in me, it's what kept me going." As they talked, the years that had separated them seemed to dissolve. Emma told him about her life, her career, and the inspiration she had drawn from their childhood friendship. Jacob, in turn, shared the story of his journey, how he had struggled to survive after leaving the streets, how a kind stranger had helped him get back on his feet, and how he had worked tirelessly to become a doctor. Each word deepened their understanding of one another, rekindling the bond that had once felt unbreakable. "I always wondered what happened to you," Emma said, her voice tinged with both relief and curiosity. "And now, here you are, saving my life." Jacob smiled, a small, tender expression that lit up his face. "It felt like destiny," he admitted. "Like everything I went through led me here, to this moment." Their conversations became the highlight of Emma's recovery. Each day, Jacob visited her, bringing books to read, flowers to brighten her room, and stories that made her laugh even through the pain. What had begun as a rekindling of friendship soon evolved into something deeper, something neither of them had dared to name just yet. One afternoon, as they sat by the window watching the sun dip below the horizon, Emma turned to Jacob with a question that had been on her mind. "Did you ever think about me? All those years?" Jacob met her gaze, his eyes unflinching. "Every day," he said simply. "You were the reason I believed I could be something more. You gave me hope, Emma, when I had none." Her heart swelled at his words, the sincerity in his tone weaving a warmth through her chest. "And you became everything you dreamed of," she replied, her voice soft. "I'm so proud of you, Jacob." As the days turned into weeks, their connection deepened. They spoke not only of the past but also of the present and the future. Emma found herself looking forward to Jacob's visits with a mix of anticipation and nervous excitement. She noticed the way his eyes lingered on her, the way his voice softened when he spoke her name, and somewhere in the quiet moments they shared, she realized that her feelings for him had grown beyond friendship. One evening, as Jacob was leaving, Emma reached out and touched his hand. "Jacob," she said, her voice steady but vulnerable, "I'm so glad you're here. I don't think I could have gotten through this without you." Jacob smiled, his fingers curling gently around hers. "You don't have to face anything alone, Emma." "Not anymore." In that moment, an unspoken promise passed between them, a promise of something more, something deeper. Neither of them said the words, but both knew their friendship had begun to blossom into love. It was a love born of shared history, mutual respect, and a profound understanding of each other's souls. And though they didn't know what the future held, they were certain of one thing: they wanted to face it together. As Emma's recovery continued, the hospital became a sanctuary of rediscovery for her and Jacob. Their bond, once rooted in the innocence of childhood, had matured into something more profound. Each moment they shared, whether it was a quiet conversation or simply sitting together in companionable silence, seemed to build a bridge between the past and the future. Jacob visited every day, his presence a steady reassurance in Emma's life. He brought her books that he knew she would love, small gestures that spoke volumes about how well he remembered the girl she had been. He listened to her stories about the articles she had written and the children whose lives she had touched. In turn, he shared tales of his journey through medical school, the challenges he had faced, and the people who had inspired him to persevere. "You were my first inspiration," Jacob admitted one afternoon, his voice filled with quiet emotion. "Every time I wanted to give up, I thought about you, about how you believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." Emma looked at him, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and affection. "And you became everything you dreamed of," she said softly. "I always knew you would, Jacob." Their connection deepened with each passing day, the unspoken feelings between them growing stronger. Emma found herself looking forward to his visits with a flutter of anticipation, her heart racing each time he entered the room. She noticed the way he looked at her, his gaze lingering with a tenderness that made her cheeks flush. And though she didn't say it out loud, she knew her feelings for him had surpassed the bounds of friendship. One evening, as the city lights outside the hospital window cast a warm glow, Jacob reached for Emma's hand. His touch was gentle, his expression earnest. "Emma," he began, his voice steady but filled with vulnerability, "there's something I need to say." She looked at him, her heart pounding, sensing the gravity of his words. "I've always cared about you," he continued, his gaze unwavering. "Even after all these years, even after everything we've been through, you've always been a part of me. And now, being here with you, I realize it's more than that. I'm in love with you." Emma's breath caught, her mind reeling with the weight of his confession. She had felt the same feelings growing within her but had been hesitant to name them, to risk disrupting the delicate balance they had found. Yet now, hearing Jacob say the words she had secretly longed for, her fears melted away. A smile spread across her face, warm and radiant. "Jacob," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "I've been in love with you too. I just didn't know how to say it." Relief and joy washed over Jacob's face, and in that moment, the weight of years apart seemed to lift. He leaned closer, their foreheads nearly touching, as if the world outside the hospital room had faded away. leaving only the two of them and the connection they had nurtured. From that day forward, their relationship blossomed. Jacob continued to visit Emma daily, but now their conversations were filled with dreams of a shared future. They spoke of places they wanted to explore, lives they wanted to touch, and a love they wanted to nurture. When Emma was finally discharged, Jacob was by her side, helping her transition from the hospital back into the world. They began spending more time together, their bond growing stronger with each shared moment. Whether it was walking through a park, cooking dinner together, or simply talking late into the night, their love became a source of strength and healing for them both. For Emma, Jacob was a reminder that love could endure time and distance, that it could grow stronger even in the face of life's challenges. For Jacob, Emma was proof that kindness and compassion could change the course of a life, that the bonds we form in our youth can shape the people we become. Their story was no longer one of separation and longing but of unity and hope. Together, they found a joy that transcended the pain of the past, a love that was both a celebration of their shared history and a promise for the future. In each other, they had found not just a partner but a home, a place where their hearts could rest and grow, knowing they would never again face the world alone. As the years went by, Emma and Jacob built a life together filled with love, laughter, and shared dreams. Their journey, once marked by hardship and separation, became a testament to the power of kindness and the enduring strength of human connection. In their home, surrounded by the warmth of family and friends, they found a happiness that surpassed all they had imagined. Their story reminds us that even the smallest acts of compassion can change lives, creating bonds that time and distance cannot break. Emma and Jacob's love was a legacy of hope, a reminder that, no matter how winding the path, true connections always find their way back. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt life stories. Together, let's celebrate the beauty of love, resilience, and the moments that make life extraordinary.